We're going to deal primarily with preparing for Pesach. If we have time, we can talk about some of the things on Pesach, but really the idea is to go through some of the changes and some of the ideas of what's going on in the supermarkets and what's going on in our lives. What do we have to, make sure that we check, and how do we kosher and change certain things? And your questions are welcome, so you can ask questions that pertain to the topic at any time that you want. And then at the end, we'll try to also have some general questions. Okay, so we should always start with the first two areas. One is shopping for food, and we'll go over some of those things, and then this koshering our kitchen and how that's done. So when we talk about shopping for food, there's really only two issues to deal with when it comes to Pesach. One is what you're buying have to have special certification for Passover, or does it not? Right? Not everything needs it, because some things by definition will be kosher for Pesach. Other things will surprise you. What needs to be kosher for Pesach that has to actually say on it. I would say probably the most interesting example that people who aren't raised with with looking at it in this way is probably milk. Right? Regular milk. Right? You'd say, what's the problem with regular milk? It comes from a cow. It's milk. What could be chametz in milk? So the fact is that the problem with milk is not the milk. It's the fortification. It's the additives that are put in milk. And the one thing that's put into milk, which is a problem more than the others, is vitamin D. And vitamin D is made from chametz. And therefore, if they add vitamin D to milk, then the milk, you can't use it under normal circumstances on Pesach. Now, today, because we have proliferated how many companies make things available on Pesach, including milk, so then we can basically say that you should only buy milk that is certified kosher for Passover. Of course, if you buy what's called Chalav Yisrael milk, which is a special type of milk which has an additional bonus, let's say, in that it's a little bit stricter in general, then you'll get it. It'll be kosher for Passover, and it'll be marked as kosher for Passover. The difference between the ones that are kosher for Passover and the ones that aren't, as far as what's in it, really is that it has vitamin D. You will actually buy kosher for Passover milk, and it'll say it has vitamin D in it, and it will not have it. Because they're not going to change the labels for a week. So sometimes it'll actually say it has vitamin D. Now, if you happen to live in a place, which hopefully none of us live in, since we hopefully all live here, but just to let you know, that if you live in a place where you can't get kosher Passover milk, when I was a child, for instance, it wasn't so accessible, and I came from a small town, we couldn't get kosher Passover milk. So in that case, we were allowed to buy before Passover regular milk with vitamin D in it, and we could use it on Passover. Now the reason is because the amount of chametz that was in the milk is very small. And it's so small that it's what you call bottle, which is it's non-existent. There is so little of it in there that it's as if it's non-existent. However, the laws of what we call bottle, of something that is so minute that Jewish law says it doesn't exist in this mixture, only applies if it's before Pesach. If you buy that milk on Pesach, then there's no such thing as bottle. It isn't as if it isn't there anymore. So if you were going to buy that milk, you'd have to buy it before Passover. But you're only allowed to do that on the circumstance that you can't get the kosher Passover milk. So I'm just telling you this as an academic exercise, because today it's pretty difficult not to be able to get it, especially in a city like Toronto. But because you're going to find in all of the stores that they're going to have kosher Passover milk.
I went into Sobeys and I saw it, kosher for Passover.
Terrific. So you just seconding what I say. So you can get that. So examples. What is it that needs certification? Is most things are going to need certification, and it's mostly because of additives. So for instance, let's say you're going to buy coffee. You want to buy Maxwell House coffee. So you'll notice that some coffees actually have a kosher for Passover certification on it, and some don't. Some of them have it all year. So you want, just to save a little money, you might want to look in the non-kosher for Passover section for regular coffee for brewing that comes in a can. because very often they'll be marked. Now, why does it have to be kosher for Passover? Because of the preservative. Coffee that comes in a can, like Maxwell House, Folgers, these types of coffees. I'm not talking about instant. I'm talking about regular coffee. They very often have additives which are to preserve it, and those will often contain chametz. But if you would go to a coffee roaster who only roasts coffee and not flavored coffee, you'd be allowed to buy that coffee and use it on Pesach without certification at all, because of how they bake it and what they do. In these cases, you have to make sure that you're buying fresh coffee. It has no preservatives. I go to a place. He's a microbrewer. He roasts small amounts, and when he does it, there's no additives at all. There's nothing in it, and basically it's perfectly acceptable in Pesach for me to use that, as it is all year. But Pesach's a bit stricter. Other examples. So of course, fruits and vegetables. We know, right? A regular cucumber, a regular tomato, of course, doesn't have to have a certification on it. But now when you come and it's processed, now it changes. Now when you buy fruits or vegetables in a can, if you're buying it in a can and it is just the fruit or vegetable in water with no additional acids like ascorbic acids, which are preservatives, and it's very common that it won't have it. So those things that are fruits or vegetables in a can that are not cooked, not processed, but simply in a can, which is pretty common, you don't need to have special certification for Passover, but you do need kosher certification, because today's companies are so broad in what they make. It's not like in the old days when you had a company that made, that put vegetables in a can. That's all they did. Today, they're owned by another company, is owned by another company, and the same line the next day could be running shrimp. Now, you have no idea what it could be. All different companies could be using the same machinery. Yeah.
What about frozen fruit? Does it have to have certification?
It has to be certified as kosher, but it's the same as in a can. It's considered kosher for Passover as long as it is kosher. Okay?
Okay, let's say, like I was at Sobeys today, and I was looking for frozen mangoes that were kosher for Passover. I couldn't find any mangoes that were frozen and kosher for Passover, so I can use the regular.
If it's kosher, you have to know that it's kosher. As long as it's marked kosher, it doesn't have to also be marked kosher for Passover.
It doesn't have to be.
But it has to be marked kosher.
I can use it as long as it's marked kosher, and if I buy it before Passover.
Well, hopefully, so you could use it. But the idea is that you're buying it, and there is nothing in that is going to be not kosher for Passover as long as it's kosher.
It has to be kosher, but it doesn't have to be marked kosher.
Correct.
And also, I read somewhere you can buy extra virgin olive oil as long as it's kosher. It doesn't have to be kosher for Passover.
Correct. Well, we'll get to it. So, other ideas besides the fruits and vegetables that you're going to come across. There's another issue that arises with vegetables, which of course is the bugs. That has nothing to do with Passover, because bugs have become very resilient because of the all types of pesticides that are used. They become very hardy, and they're very often hard to get rid of. Because of it, right, bugs are not kosher. You can't eat a bug. And probably anybody who knows that there's a bug on something probably wouldn't. But what we don't realize is that there's bugs on many of our vegetables. One of the most common one that we're going to be using at Passover for those people who use romaine lettuce for moror, for bitter herb, that's the most common one that you're going to have a problem with, because it has to be checked diligently. And the amount of moror that you use, the amount of the leaves that you have to use if you have a large seder is enormous. So I would strongly suggest that when you're buying these things, you buy the brands like Bodek, which is an example of a company that grows the vegetables in a way where they don't have an issue with bugs. Either they're hydroponic, grown on water, where they're kept in bags and there's never access to bugs, or they're pre-checked. You can find them in pretty much any supermarket. There is a premium to that, but you don't have to check it. And when you do have to check, right, it's a lot of time, right? So you don't want to do more than you have to there. In addition, other things that do or do not need to be certified as specifically for Passover. So we have, like we went through the coffee. Now tea. Right? If you would be buying just tea, right, loose tea that was regular tea, not flavored and not herbal, that would be kosher because it's simply a leaf. However, very few people buy it that way. So you do need to buy tea that has a certification of kosher for Passover on it, again because of the preservatives. Most teas that you come across that are certified kosher will also be certified kosher for Passover. It's very common that you find it because it's not very difficult for them to do it. So you'll find that. When it comes to meat and chicken and so forth, so many of the companies that actually do the slaughtering of meat that are kosher will actually be kosher for Passover all year. They very often will do that all year. They don't have no need to bring bread into a slaughterhouse, so they'll usually be 100% fine. Already you will find the meat marked as kosher for Passover. But if you would, and this has happened, where if you would go and buy meat from Sobeys or one of the kosher butchers, and it wouldn't be marked for Passover, and you'd buy it now, you can rely on the fact that it is kosher for Passover. That's plain meat. That's not hamburger. That's not anything that has been had additives or been upgraded and changed by humans.
Like or roast.
Well, roast is a piece of meat.
Right.
It's plain meat.
And then so ground beef, that's also plain meat too.
No, ground beef has already been adulterated. It's already been changed. So that's different. So in plain meat, you don't have an issue, but it's going to be hard to find meat or chicken now from this point, for sure from this point on, that's not certified kosher for Passover, but they are going to be. Though why you'd have to with chicken is because they often make chicken that come with sauces on it already. These might even not even be cooked, but they'll have sauces on it for when you cook it. You don't want to add barbecue sauce, you can buy with barbecue sauce. So these types of things are very often chametz. So one needs to be a bit more careful with that. But in meat in general is not really an issue. So when you go into any butcher market, you can ask them if it's kosher for Passover, but in general, it's like we had one time it came up where somebody bought a roast for Passover, and they had this big roast that they made for all these people, and then for some reason they looked at the wrapping like a couple hours before the Seder, and they realized it didn't say kosher for Passover. It turns out that it was fine because of how the meat is done, and it wasn't an issue. But it's not like that with processed foods.
Like I bought, today I bought brisket and Miami ribs, plain meat, and I asked the rabbi at Sobeys if it was kosher for Passover. He said yes, everything on the shelf is kosher.
Just like I said.
What?
That's like I just said.
Yeah.
So, not the. In addition, what about paper goods? You're not eating paper goods, right? But do they have to be kosher for Passover? And cleaning supplies. These are two things I get lots of questions about. So some paper goods have to have certification and some don't. And the reason is because very often paper goods will have cornstarch added to them in order so they should be stiff. Like paper plates. They can make paper plates thinner today using less paper, more economical for them by adding cornstarch to the paper plates, and it causes the paper plates to become sturdier so that they won't fall apart. That cornstarch you can't use on Pesach. So when it comes to paper plates, you need to get ones that are approved. If you don't want to buy ones that are approved or you can't find it, you can buy styrofoam plates. Now they're not as good for the environment, but styrofoam by definition is fine to use. You have the napkins. It's preferable that napkins should have a certification for the same reason, right? The same idea. Right? We should try because sometimes they'll add cornstarch, but not as often. The best way to deal with it is if you can't get ones that are certified, you just take the ones on the end, the two napkins on the ends of the package that you bought, and don't use those because that's usually where the problem would arise, and everything else would be fine. Paper towels are also fine; they don't need to be certified. Cups. Right, a paper cup has the same problem as a paper plate. A styrofoam cup is fine. Plastic cups are fine.
And what about plastic plates and bowls?
They're fine.
Yeah.
They're fine. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're buying cups, especially if you're going to use them for the Seder, if you have a lot of people coming over, remember that it's preferable to buy small cups. This has nothing to do with being kosher for Passover. This has to do with the fact that you're going to drink 4 cups of wine. The amount of wine that you have to drink in a cup is a little over 4 ounces. That's a kitchen cup, right? Like you have when that little tiny cup. That's 4 ounces, right? So when if you go and buy an 8-ounce cup, a 12-ounce cup, and people drink the 4 of those, right? It's not good. So you want to buy smaller cups. They have to be a little over 4 ounces. If you buy those size cups, it's fine, and then people can actually use those for the Seder. Otherwise, you can use any cup you want for your own use. Plastic silverware is fine. You don't have to have it checked. They're 100% fine. The tablecloths, plastic tablecloths that you buy to throw away, they're fine. Paper tablecloths can have the same issue with the cornstarch. One of the ways, if you bought it and you didn't check, or you can't find them and you have them, is that you simply don't allow them to get wet. And then they won't have a problem, because when it gets wet, the cornstarch will come off it and it can go onto your food or onto your plates or whatever. So you don't want to. But it's preferable to get plastic ones, or to have a regular tablecloth. A regular tablecloth that you use all year, you can use on Pesach. If it's washable, you just wash it before Pesach. Put it in the washing machine and wash it. It comes out. Any tablecloth or cloth napkin that you use, even a towel, theoretically, that you can, as soon as you wash it, it becomes parv unused. So the only reason you may not want to do that with your towels in general is because you can get confused. In other words, if you use always red towels for meat, blue towels for milk, and you wash them, you could reverse it now. It's perfectly fine. But if you are always using red for meat, you don't want to start playing around and using a red one for milk, because then you'll start getting confused and you'll use them for milk and meat. And that we shouldn't do. But if you wash your tablecloth before Pesach, it's 100% fine. Okay? So now to go to, let's see, let's talk about matzah. Now, there's a couple of things that come up with matzah, and there's 2 issues that people always raise that are worthy of discussing. One is the question of what we called shmura matzah versus non-shmura matzah, and the second is the idea of what's called gebrachs, which means to dunk or to place in. And I'll explain them both, because they're both very common and you're going to come across this. So shmura matzah means that you have matzah that was shmura. Shmura means to guard. Like a shomer is a policeman in Hebrew. If a person has a rule, if you want to have matzah, the matzah can't be chametz. So how do you know it's not chametz? So you have a certification. But there's a level of certification on there that's called shmur, that means from the moment that the wheat was harvested until it's in the package, somebody has been watching it to make sure that no water came into contact with the wheat. Because as soon as water comes in contact with the wheat, it starts the process of fermenting and becoming chametz. Within 18 minutes, it'll become chametz. So they guard it from the moment it's harvested until it's finished baking. That's shmura matzah, and because it's guarded that way, it's more expensive. That's not to say that other matzah is chametz, regular non-shmura. It's not chametz. There is chametz matzah, but I mean there is Passover matzah that is not shmura. A person has to act according to what they'd like to, as far as how if you eat shmura matzah or you don't eat shmura matzah only. In other words, shmura matzah is more expensive. It's more strict. My recommendation is that at the Seder, that you should use the handmade shmura matzah, which is symbolic of the matzah that they used when they came out of Egypt. It's also, according to all opinions, a very good one to use. Not every opinion. There are some that prefer machine matzah, but very few. In general, handmade shmura matzah is what you should use, at least at the Seder. If you'd like to be stricter, it's perfectly fine. You can use shmura matzah all the time. There are many people who do. But if you take upon yourself to use only shmura matzah, you have limited yourself from almost every box cake that there is. When you buy a Banashevitz or any of the other brand cakes that you make, then none of them are made with shmura matzah. They're all made with regular matzah. It's 100% kosher for Passover. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you take upon yourself that you want to be strict and use only shmura matzah for all of Passover, which is a nice thing to do, but I'm not necessarily encouraging everyone to do it. It means that you've limited yourself with all processed or pre-processed foods. So shmura matzah, it's good to get for the Seder. And you can get them in many different places. And they are certainly considerably more expensive. But if you have it only for the Seder, depending on how many people you have, right, it's not that bad.
I don't recommend them making by yourself. Some people go to the extent of making them their own.
Okay.
Is it better to do that one?
If you know what you're doing. So the second thing is called gebrochs. Gebrochs is a custom that, and anyone who comes to my classes knows that I do not really comment on people's customs, because there is a reason for a custom. However, if you do not have the custom of this gebrochs, which I'll explain what it is, do not take it upon yourself. And what it really means is that you are accepting that you will not allow any type of liquid to touch your matzah. So therefore, you will not make matzah balls. Right? That will not be possible. You cannot make matzah balls without having your matzah touch liquid. You will have to eat matzah separate from the rest of the food on your table, because it'll crumble into your soup. Right? Many of the things that you make, right? Any box cake is going to be non-gebrochs, because it's made out of matzah meal, and you're going to have to add eggs and water to it. So people who keep this are primarily Hasidim, many different types of Hasidim. A lot of Hungarian Jews will keep this as well, but it's a custom. There's a tradition that the Chafetz Chaim, who is the great legal authority of the previous generations, who wrote the authoritative book on Jewish law, used to take a piece of matzah and put it in a glass of water and leave it in his window, so people would stop asking him if you're allowed to do that. Because it's a custom that many people have, but it's not a custom by Lithuanian Jews or German Jews, and many other Jews do not have such a custom, and there's really no reason to accept it. And it will make your life very difficult. If you're going away for Passover, most of the places you go to will keep it. They'll keep this law and not allow the matzah to get wet. That's because they want to sell as many places as they can, and there are people who won't eat there if they don't do that. But in general, you don't need to do it. If it's your custom, good for you, keep your custom. If it's not your custom, I'm encouraging you not to do this. It is not a sign of how religious you are. It is a custom of certain groups. Okay, so those are the two main customs that affect matzah. And therefore one should try, as I said before, you should try to use shmura matzah. You certainly should use it at your Seder. The rest of the time it's not obligatory. It's a good thing to do, but not necessary. And the idea of gebrochs, which is a Yiddish word, you really should, if you don't have the custom, don't adopt that custom. It's very difficult, and it has an effect on everything that you do. That's why you'll notice by Hasidim, for instance, that they make almost everything out of potato starch rather than matzah meal, and it's very hard to use, and it's certainly not as it's not the same. Therefore, they keep this idea of gebroch, so they use potato starch, so therefore there's never any matzah meal that gets wet. They're not using matzah meal at all, right? That's their alternative idea. So that takes care of those few things, but keep that in mind. You can use cake meal and matzah meal and so forth. It all has to be certified kosher for Pesach. Now I know it sounds superfluous to tell you that matzah has to be certified for Pesach, but there are two issues that come up with that. One is there is matzah that is not kosher for Passover. It's rare that you'll see it, but especially at Passover time, but there is some. So take a look at the box when you buy it. The second thing is egg matzah. Egg matzah presents a bit of a problem. And it's one of the most gross acts of false advertising that I've ever come across. I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but it's horrible. Egg matzah should not be used by a healthy, like a regular healthy Jew. Should not use egg matzah. Egg matzah is not chametz, but by definition, the matzah we use is called the bread, the poor person's bread. Poor person's bread is made of flour and water. By definition, the same Talmud says a rich person's bread is bread with additives like eggs. And that's not what our matzah is supposed to be. So why do they make egg matzah? So if you read the box, and if you will either have to be able to read the box in Yiddish or in Hebrew. This is why I say it's always been false advertising. It'll say on there that this matzah is only for elderly and ill people, and that other people really shouldn't use it. and that's true.
What does that say?
According to Jewish law, a regular healthy adult Jew should not use egg matzah. It's really for people who are ill, people who are elderly, people who are very young, like little kids. They're allowed to use it because it's not chametz, but it's not something that we're supposed to use. And it's today I've noticed that they started to put it in English on there, but for a long time it was only in Yiddish, and which was sort of sad.
What do they consider ill? To what extent?
It's so ill that the doctor tells you that you can't eat matzah because it'll hurt you.
So someone got sick before Pesach, and then
It has to be sick that would make a difference. You can't say that if you have a headache, it's not going to make a difference of what kind of matzah you eat. It has to be a sickness that will be affected by the matzah. Right? That's really the idea. And elderly people who have trouble digesting it more so than younger people. So that's also an issue. So we have to keep that in mind. That you really should not use egg matzah.
What about
Also,
matzah?
that's fine. Chocolate covered matzah is very often egg matzah. So watch for that if you're going to go out and buy chocolate covered matzah as like a dessert or something. First thing, it's got matzah in it, so it's sort of hard to eat because you've got to go through the whole thing of washing your hands and making a motzi. Second thing is it's egg matzah usually, which you really shouldn't eat in the first place. So it's just something to keep in mind.
Egg matzah at all during Pesach?
What?
Should you use egg matzah at all during
Correct.
Pesach?
You should not eat egg matzah at all.
I have a recipe for chocolate covered matzah. But you can eat that during the Passover.
If you make it yourself and you make it correctly, yeah, you can. Okay? So, another area that you have to keep in mind that is becoming a bit more common when you purchase foods is kitniot. So kitniot means legumes. And it is certain things that Ashkenazic Jews, it was the rabbis a number of centuries ago, forbade us from eating legumes on Passover. It's by rabbinic law. It's not from the Torah, but that's why Ashkenazim don't eat rice on Passover. That's why we don't eat peas on Passover. Certain other types of things like that, because those are what's called kitniot. The Sephardic Jews do eat them. They didn't have a law that they couldn't. It doesn't mean that we can. It means that their tradition allows them to. And if we eat it, it's not chametz. Right? It's not like eating bread, but we shouldn't eat it. It's rabbinically forbidden. So now when you go into the stores, with the proliferation of Sephardic Jews in Israel, and we import a lot of our kosher for Passover food from Israel, you will sometimes come across food that will say is only for those who eat kitniot, which means Sephardim. So that if you're in Sobeys and you pick up something and you say, I never saw this before, and you read it, you have to make sure that it is not kitniot, because we can't eat that. Right? And it's rabbinic, but it's serious. So one should stay away from anything like that. Right? Those are the general rules. I brought a bunch of these books from the COR because they took away a lot of my job in that they have a whole section here of what needs Passover certification and what does not need Passover certification and what is kitniot. And they have pages of items here of what needs and what doesn't need and why. So, and it'll tell you, for instance, Folgers Instant Coffee and Taster's Choice Instant Coffee does not need Passover certification. And whole bean coffee does not need Passover certification, but ground coffees do, because they have preservatives put in. So you see the differences. So they'll tell you that. They takes away a lot of the things I deal with in this class usually. So the next area we need to spend some time on is the area that deals with preparing your home. How do you kosher things for your house? So when I was younger and I was a child, it was extremely common that you basically koshered everything. Like my mother used to take almost the whole kitchen and kosher everything for Passover. And then we came to the conclusion there were a lot of things we never used. Sometimes we forget Passover is only a week. It's not that long. So you don't necessarily need every object in your kitchen. However, there are certain things that you can kosher, or that you should kosher, or you're able to. There is a general concept that one should limit koshering items for Passover. Not that you can't do it, but if you have the ability to have something that is specifically always for Passover, it's preferred. Because by definition, you're going to have less of a chance of it being a problem because you never used chametz in the pot, so it's going to be fine, right? So one is preferred to have those types of things for Passover. But for newlyweds and for people who don't have unlimited budgets and people who are becoming stricter, right? You know, to simply go and buy everything new is pretty difficult. So here's how it works with koshering things. Let's start with our appliances, which of course you can kosher. We'll start with the oven. So because the oven is used in and of itself to cook food, of course the oven is going to become chametz very quickly, as is the stove. So when you're dealing with an oven, the best thing you do is you put it on self-clean. If you have a self-cleaning oven, you have saved yourself an enormous amount of effort, because by self-cleaning the oven, it becomes kosher for Passover. Right? Now they will tell you not to leave the racks in. The idea being is that they're afraid that the racks will melt because it gets so hot.
Or the inside of the door. That obviously considered kosher when you self-clean it.
What?
Because that's to get to a certain temperature, so when you self-clean the door.
They won't let you open the door when you self-clean it.
But the door gets to the right temperature too?
Yes, of course. It's the whole thing does. So let me just explain. So how an oven will work, right, is that if you do leave the grates inside of it that you use to cook on, so they will become kosher for Passover because you're heating them up to such a high extent that anything that's absorbed into it's going to come out. So that's really how an oven works. Now, after you've done this, you should make sure that you clean out. Right? You have to clean out any food before you do it that's in your oven, and then you should get rid of any of the ashes. If you didn't have ashes or you didn't get rid of them, the world doesn't fall apart. But beforehand, you should try to make sure there's no food in there, right, before you actually kosher it. Your stovetop is a bit different. There are really three different types of stovetops. You have gas stoves, you have electric stoves, and then you have glass tops. Right? Glass tops are becoming very common. Gas stoves are your best bet for Passover. There are many reasons why. For those who keep the holiday, right, and they don't break the holiday by driving and so forth. So one of the things is that if you have a gas stove, you can turn the gas up and down on a holiday in order to cook better. On an electric stove you can't, but on a gas stove you can. So gas is somewhat preferred for that reason. In both cases, with gas and electric, the koshering of the top is pretty similar. What you have is the burner itself, right? So in a gas stove, the burner is nothing to kosher; it's a burner. But you have a thing that the pot sits on. It's usually made out of iron. That you have to kosher. One way of koshering is putting in your oven when you self-clean the oven. That will accomplish it. Another way of doing it is that you have to heat it up to a point where it's hotter than it was before. So you'd run it the flames. You have to have the flames running on it for a longer period of time. Also, you should always not use it for 24 hours with food before you do this, because that's just an added way of making sure that it's kosher.
Does that include the stove top too?
I'm only talking about the stove top at this time.
I can use, the last time I could use a stove was 24 hours.
It's preferred 24 hours before you kosher it.
Stove top and in the oven too.
Yes.
Usually when I self-clean my oven, I always put the racks in, and they're fine.
Okay.
So I can put the racks in this time, and also the burners.
Right. So then you're fine. So the other thing is a catch basin that you have underneath. It's underneath where you spill. It's going to go. It's recommended to buy new ones. They're only about $8 a piece. If for some reason you can't, you should clean them out, and you should put aluminum foil on it, because what happens is, of course, if hot food spills into it, it will cause it'll start to rise up. You'll have like the fumes from the food that's treif, and that's chametz, is going to rise up and get to your food. So the very least, it's best to replace them. Like I said, they're very inexpensive. You can actually take the ones that you have, and you don't have to throw them out. You can put them away. You can buy ones that you have for Pesach and just use them for that week. Or very often you can buy aluminum foil ones that are made to be thrown away. But you should try to do that. Now we'll get to the glass stovetop, which is the big question, because the rules seem to be changing about it all the time. And basically, you have a glass stovetop. You have to be very careful with a glass stovetop because you can break it. You can cause it to crack, and then you're up the creek because you may as well have to buy a new one. It's not easy to buy that piece. So what we do is that you don't use it also for 24 hours before you do this, and you clean it like you would normally clean it, and then you turn the burners on high. You leave it until they get fully heated, and then you leave them on for approximately 5 more minutes. Then you can turn them off. Now what you've done is you've koshered the glass top where the burners are. You have not koshered the glass in the other areas. And the way you can see makes it different than most cases, is you could put your hand on the rest of the glass and it didn't get hot. You didn't do anything to it. So in order to use the glass stovetop, you can't just leave it open. You're going to have to put something to cover the areas of the stovetop that are not where the burners are. But there's another problem, is that if you cover it really well, you'll break the top because the heat will intensify underneath it. Liquids can get in and it'll mess it up. So the best thing to do is to use like trivets, pot holders, these types of things, just to put them down on your stovetop and to make sure that whenever you put a pot or something down on the stove, you're putting it on something, not on the stovetop. Yeah.
Okay, I've got a gas stove, and under my gas stove I have these rings. You know,
Okay.
the gas. Do those need to be put in the self-clean oven too?
Or they have to be covered, or they have to be replaced. Something like that. You can't
Those
use
little
the
thing. No,
Yes, I know what you mean. The metal rings. Yeah.
They have to be.
Yes. You have to replace them or kosher them. Right?
Kosher.
Or
I
cover
put them on a self-clean oven. Those little round.
I guess.
No,
You
that,
can.
that
I know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Right. So now you've got, so that's pretty much covers the oven. The stovetop, the glass stovetop is the most difficult. There used to be, people said you should pour hot water on it and they were cracking. You should not do that. So you should really just kosher the parts where your burner would be, and the rest you should put down, pot warmers, pot holders, whatever it is that you want, and never put anything down on the stovetop. Okay? Your counters are similar, depending what your counter is made out of. If your counter is made out of an object that Jewish law says absorbs, then it's very difficult, if possible at all, to kosher it for Passover. So this type of material, right?
Arborite?
What? No,
Arborite?
this is just like a vinyl that's put on top. That cannot be koshered.
Okay.
This is, right, if you have countertops like this, right, and you bought the house new, so then you made them milk or meat. If you bought the house from someone else who didn't necessarily keep kosher, your countertops aren't kosher, because whatever spills on it it absorbs it. So, but if you have ones made out of granite, you have ones made out of stone, right? They don't absorb, and those are considered fine. You don't have to do anything for them for Pesach. You should wait You should not use them with chametz for 24 hours. You should put some hot water on it, but that's it. There's not a problem. You don't have to cover them. You can use those countertops 100% without a problem. It's the other substances that they can be made out of, the less expensive ones like these types, where you have a problem. You can do things. In my home, before we had a new kitchen put in about 10 years ago, we had this corrugated plastic. It was almost like cardboard, but it was made out of plastic, that we had somebody come and they cut it to fit the top of our counter, and it was flat and light. We used to just stick it in the closet all year and then pull it out, and the whole kitchen, it didn't weigh 2 pounds. So it was terrific. So if you want to do something like that, you can do that. Your refrigerator, you have to take the chametz out. You have to clean it, but you don't cook in your refrigerator, so therefore you don't have to worry about, although they're talking about making ones now that you will be able to, but right now you don't have to worry about that. What you have to really do is clean your refrigerator out, make sure that everything's clean, right, and then you can use it. If you are not positive that everything is totally clean, then you should cover some of it. Now, but be careful. If you cover everything in your refrigerator, you will have a broken refrigerator, because the whole idea is that the air has to circulate throughout the inside of your refrigerator, and it does that by holes in the various platforms, and in the back, on the sides, and within it. If you cover everything with aluminum foil, right? You will stop that from happening, and you'll have parts of your refrigerator that'll be hot, some will be cold, and it'll constantly run. You can end up breaking it. So don't do that. You have no need to do it. Just clean it. You don't cook in there. It's just make sure there's no chametz in there. Clean it out. Yes.
I want to ask you a stupid question. I don't know if it's a stupid question or not. Once you clean the oven for Passover, once it's clean out, can you put any chametz in it after it's been cleaned?
Not unless you want to clean it again.
No. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So the refrigerator is simple, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't cook in it. Basically, you clean it. Now, any different than you would a cupboard, right? Your dishwasher, they're a problem because it is true that you can kosher dishwashers that without a problem if they're stainless steel. Very few of us really have stainless steel dishwashers. The insides are usually ceramic. And even if they are stainless steel on the inside, which more and more are being made that way, the problem is that your racks are rubber coated, and they become whatever it is that was in there. So if you want to have a Pesach kitchen, buy yourself a dishwasher. Today they're not that expensive, like $300. You can get a portable dishwasher and leave it in your Pesach kitchen, or have it built in. If you don't have a Pesach kitchen, you have to wash dishes for a week, or use paper. It's just there's nothing much you can do. The dishwashers are a problem. Your sinks. So there's basically two types of sinks. You're going to have ceramic covered sinks, and you're going to have stainless steel sinks. Stainless steel is much more common today than it used to be. Stainless steel, basically you don't use it for chametz for 24 hours. They heat up water in your teapot, pour boiling water over throughout the sink, and it's now kosher for Passover. All right. If you have a ceramic one, you can't kosher it. Right? You cannot. So what I suggest, just pragmatically, is you go and buy a Tupperware bowl, like these big bowls that they use, and it fits into your sink. You put your dishes into that. You wash it in there. It's not as easy because the water doesn't drain out the bottom, right? It's sealed, not like your sink. So it's a little bit more effort. But if you have that type of sink, that's what I suggest you do, because you cannot kosher that kind of sink.
In order to kosher the sink, you can't use it for chametz for 24 hours.
Before you do it, correct. For hot chametz. So now the next question is the spout on your sink. All right, so the spout on your sink water can come out of it that's hot enough, theoretically they could cook. Definition in Jewish law is that if it causes your hand to pull away from it without thinking, that's hot enough to cook. So water can come out of your faucet that hot. So some people will say that because of that you should wrap aluminum foil around the faucet, not where the water comes out, of course, just around it. But it's much more common that you can take hot water, just like you do on the rest of the sink, and pour it on the faucet, and it'll be fine, right? And you don't have to worry about it. Yes.
What about your hot water kettle?
Okay, so your hot water kettle all depends on how you clean it. If you're careful with it, let's say I have an urn, a coffee urn. All I use it for is water. Right? I am not very good about it, so I have never cleaned it. Right? I never put vinegar in it to clean it. So you can use it. It's fine, no problem. If you aren't careful and you've made things in it, you used it for coffee, used it for other things, you've washed it with other objects, then you have to buy another one for Pesach. Some people will buy new ones and then just use it during the year, but whatever you want, right? Say that with a coffee maker, you have the same issue, right? Like a Mr. Coffee kind of drip machine, because you can use coffees that are not kosher for Passover throughout the year, and it makes the machine chametz. You can't really kosher it; it's plastic, right? So you'd have to get a special one for Pesach. What a lot of people are doing now is that they're getting a French press, which or another word for it is a bodum. Right? It's basically a coffee maker that you put the coffee in, you put water in, and then you have a top on it, and then you put a plunger down. You pull the plunger down after the coffee is made, and it separates all of the coffee grounds from the water, and then you have coffee. But those are anywhere from around $12 to $40, depends what you make them out of, and you can use those on Passover. And what's the nice thing about about it is you can use those on Yom Tov itself. You can actually make, but you can make like roasted coffee, regular coffee on Yom Tov by using that. While you can't use your regular coffee maker on Yom Tov because it's electric. You can't turn it on and off. But this one you can.
How about the preset ones?
Well, it becomes a problem because if you're on Shabbos, for instance, you're cooking. So on Yom Tov, it's pretty difficult. You could use one that's preset that goes on by itself, but you have to be ready for it. Right? And like what time? You never know, right? Especially on Passover. So the best thing is to get one that you do yourself. Going back to some other appliances. So we've done the oven, we've done the dishwasher, we've done the sink, we've done the refrigerator.
What about the microwave?
So we'll get to that one. The disposal, right, is not an issue, right? Or the garburator, as we call it in Canada. They're not an issue. You just have to run it before Pesach, and you should put some type of cleanser in it, as if like you use the cleansers you use if it's a little clogged up. And the reason is because if you've ever had one back up on you, food comes into your sink. That food is probably chametz because it's in your pipes now. So then your sink becomes chametz. So by pouring bleach or some of the other things you use to get rid of lime into the sink, into the drain, whatever food might be in there, it becomes spoiled. And then if it would happen, it would be okay if it would back up. But certainly you don't want it to back up, but it happens, especially on Pesach with the amount of time that we're using it. So I'd say another area. So now we'll get a little more specific. Let's talk. The microwave presents a bit of a problem. There are two schools of thought. For a long period of time, everybody agreed that you could kosher a microwave, and you did so by taking a cup of water, putting it in the microwave, turning it on until the inside was steamed, then taking out the cup of water, wiping it down, and it's kosher. That's how you do it during the year. If you use a microwave for meat and you want to use it for milk, you can do that and it works. So that was what everyone did for Pesach for many years. And then some people, some of the authorities felt that was not adequate and they won't allow you to use a microwave. So one has to do as they think is best. Many of the people I know who are very well educated still do kosher their microwaves for Passover. Your problem can lie with the tray that's inside. There's usually a plexiglass tray found inside of your microwave. That can become chametz. That's where a problem could arise. So if you have a different one that you can replace it with, that's preferable. If it allows you to run it without it, that's preferable. And if not, if you haven't done it used it for chametz for 24 hours before Pesach, you can wrap it in plastic. Don't wrap it in aluminum foil. You'll blow up your microwave. In plastic wrap and seal it, and you can use that. That's not preferred. It's not the best way of doing it. But if it's the only way, then I'm giving you a way to do it. But for those who want to be strict, would not use a microwave on Pesach because of that.
Well, that one specifically just for Pesach.
What?
You don't want it specifically for Pesach.
Well, of course, if it's only for Pesach, of course you can use it on
What
Pesach.
you can do, you can kosher and then wrap it up with
Well, like I said, with plastic wrap.
plastic.
Okay, so that pretty much covers most of the things in your kitchen. You've got your counters we've dealt with. We talked about your tablecloths, that you can wash your tablecloths if you need, if you don't have special ones for Passover. A lot of people have these little placemats they use. Those can be problematic because they're usually plastic. So that you can't use for Pesach if you use it during the year. If you have a cloth one, you can wash it. If not, you can get special ones for Pesach or not use them at all, depending on how the rest of your house is set up.
How about cutting boards?
What?
Cutting boards.
Well, a cutting board would be the same thing. If you use it for chametz, it becomes chametz, and you can't really do
Use
anything
like
to
a
change it.
marble one or granite one.
So that's fine. Just like your cupboard.
How about like a wood one?
So wood one is the issue. You can't use it.
And there's no engravings in it?
If wood absorbs, right? The only way you want to use it, the way you can use it, is you'll have to sand it down far enough that the parts that you sanded down you could pick up, right? So don't do it. So that pretty much covers most of the things there. Now let's talk about some of the objects you're going to use: your pots, pans, glasses, and so forth. So the rule is that if you're dealing with metal, something that's metal, that the way that it enters, that chametz enters the pot or the silverware, is the way it comes out. So what you do is, if you have a pot and you boil water in that pot, so you can take it and you can boil water in the pot, right? So it's very hot, and then let's try the preferred way first. The preferred way is that you have a big pot, a very big pot, and it's a Pesach pot. A lot of people might have a very large soup pot they use on Pesach, and what you would do is you'd fill that with water, and you take that water to boil, and then you could drop your silverware or other totally metal objects into that pot, and then when the water cools down, you can take it out, and they are all parv, kosher for Passover. That's 100% metal objects, silverware, some pots that have metal handles, those types of objects, right, become kosher for Passover by doing that. An easy way that might cost you a little bit of money to do it is that the community sponsors over at the Buy It, they have this giant pot, like a giant, you never saw a pot like this, that's used, and it's used for koshering. And you just go by with your pot, and they'll kosher it for you in a second and give it right back to you. Right? I'm sure there's a fee involved. I don't know what it is, but you can do that.
We should have one here so we can make some profit for
Well, even the Buy It's not making a profit on it. It's done by the community.
Okay.
Right? It's done for the entire city, but because they're large, everyone can go there, and you can't put 500 people in a parking lot.
How about a metal knife with the wooden handle?
So the handle's a problem. It's wooden.
If between the wood is metal, you hold it together.
I know, but the wood itself, if you put the wood into a wooden knife into your dishwasher, it's going to get everything. It's going to get washed, not just the metal. So it becomes a problem. So you can only kosher metal ones this way. Now, china, and in general, cannot be koshered. So if you want to use your china from the regular week on Pesach, you really can't. Now you have to use paper or buy dishes that you're going to use on Pesach. Glass. So originally, this is another example where originally everybody koshered glass who needed to. And the way that it's done is that you have to fill a tub with water. You can use a bathtub, you could use a large tub, a large pot, and you put the glass into the pot, and every day replace the water every 24 hours. After 3 days, it's fine. That's koshering glass. I would say that I don't know anybody who does it anymore. Either they own glass, right? They own glass for Passover, or they don't kosher it at all, and they just buy paper. When I was a kid, people used to see people do it, but I never see it happening anymore. But that's how you do it. In general, it's better to buy glass, enough glass, or to use plastic or paper cups for 1 week. Your serving utensils, right, if they're metal, are not a problem, but things that are not metal are an issue. If you're talking about silver is a metal as far as Jewish law is concerned, so if you have real silverware, you can kosher them, and you can have them.
What about a silicone? No, what about a silicone bun pan? That doesn't have to be kosher for Passover.
Well, it can't be kosher for Passover. So,
but I can use it for Passover.
No, you can't. Not if you use it for chametz.
No, let's say buy brand new. Yeah.
Well, of course you can use it if it's brand new. Yeah. Anything you buy brand new, you can use.
How about glasses for Passover? Can you use it for both meat and dairy?
No, legally it would be acceptable, but Jewish law says that you shouldn't interchange because you'll make mistakes and make problems. And if you interchange it within 24 hours, then you've got it. Then it's treif. So it's a problem. You should have separate ones. What other objects are you going to have? So basically that's koshering your kitchen, koshering the objects that you use within your kitchen. That covers pretty much most of them. How about outside of your kitchen? Like, you're not allowed to use chametz. So for instance, chametz is grain alcohol. So of course that's liquor. That's all chametz that you can't use. But there are other things that have alcohol in it that we use. And are we allowed to use them? So, for instance, women's perfume has alcohol in it. A lot of deodorants have alcohol in it. Many shoe polish has alcohol in it. Many things will have things in it that are chametz, and are you allowed to use it? So here is, again, an example of the difference between custom and law. The law says that if the object that you want to use is so bad tasting that a dog wouldn't eat it. I know it sounds funny, but a dog will eat anything. So but a dog's not going to. For instance, you ever taste perfume by mistake, on purpose?
Not really.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
Okay.
So according to the letter of the law, you would not have to replace your perfume for Pesach because it's not edible by a dog even. So therefore, it's not food. Right? It's food. Chametz is food that's forbidden. Right? So it's not food. Now the custom is that we try to only use things that are not chametz, that has no chametz in it. But if you're dealing with something like perfume and you can't get it, so then you can use it because it's not something that is considered to be food. So the same thing with other types of things except something that will go in your mouth. Lipstick, toothpaste. Those are two things you've got to be strict about. Many toothpastes are kosher for Pesach. Many of them are kosher for Pesach that don't have special certification. You can look in the book. It'll give you a number of examples. A new one this year, I think, is Tom's has become kosher for Pesach. But you have to check. When it comes to lipstick and toothpaste, of course, you put that in your mouth. Mouthwash is not going to be kosher for Pesach unless it's special because it has alcohol in it. That's what you're tasting. That's what's killing the bacteria in your mouth. Right? So by definition, you're not going to be able to have that. That's not kosher for Pesach. And even the ones that kosher for Pesach are not so effective because they don't have alcohol in them. So just a few examples. So when it comes to your shoe polish, when it comes to perfumes, shampoos, all of this stuff, it's preferable to use kosher for Passover. If you can't get it, or it's too much of an expense, you can use your other stuff. As long as it doesn't say right on it that it has chametz, like shampoo that has beer in it, which there's times when they do that. They think that there's a belief that beer is good for curly hair. Who knows? That's what they said. So that you'll have ones that will advertise that they have that in there. So you have to be careful. But if it doesn't literally have chametz in it, it's just like derivatives or things like that. It's not a problem. You can use all of those things. You don't have to sell them. You can make use of them.
How about alcohol that's kosher for Passover that you open during the year? But
Did you guard it when nothing would get near it? Well, then it depends if you can use it.
No comment in it.
You can't assume it, anything. If you buy something, wine is kosher for Passover all year in general. And if you buy it in January and you open it and leave it in your refrigerator for 3 months, I can't tell you that it's kosher for Passover. Yeah, who knows what we came into contact with? Right? It's pragmatic. It's not.
If you keep it in the liquor drawer, and that's all you keep there is liquor.
Well, again, the same thing.
And then
You have to tell me. That's the fact is. You have to tell me, what did you do with it? If you put it by itself, you guarded it, you made sure nothing got near it or on it, you didn't mix things. If you know that, then go ahead. But you have to know it, not believe it. You got to know it, and I don't know anybody who knows it. Right? But if you do, then I can't tell you you're wrong. If you bought a bottle that's kosher for Passover and you used it all year and you have no other liquor in the house and you kept it in a special Passover cabinet, go right ahead. You can use it. But I just don't know anybody who's done that. Yeah. Okay, so so this is basically how our kitchens are working, and other areas as well when it comes to things that are chametz that are not for food. So we're often lenient. Now, where you have a problem is with pets, because when it says that you're not allowed to use chametz on Passover, what it really means is you're not allowed to get any type of usage of chametz on Passover. Not that you can't eat it only, but you can't use it. You can't benefit from chametz on Passover. So you have a problem with animal food, because lots of dog foods, for instance, cat foods, are filled with chametz. They may tell you whatever they want. They're filled with chametz. And you're benefiting from it because you are feeding it to your dog, which is your dog, and you own it. You own the chametz. You own that, right? You didn't sell it. It's there. So you have to either get dog foods or animal foods that are not chametz, which you can get. Right? There are ones. I have a brother who's a veterinarian. He told me that the kind he sells all year has no chametz in it. Not because it doesn't have chametz, because it happens to be the one that the veterinarians suggest. But it's a bit more expensive. It's only a week. So one needs to be careful to make sure that also your animal food, right? You can't benefit from chametz.